Hi guys, I'm Kay Spivey, and today I wanted to talk to you about how to submit your work to literary journals. Obviously, the first advice is to finish what you're writing completely, revise and edit it as best you can so that you know that you're sending out your best result. However, I'm going into this video assuming that you've gotten all the way past that and you are completely ready to send out your work to be read to the rest of the world. There's two main websites that I trust to have a good database of literary magazines to send to, and that's Duotrope and Poets and Writers. Duotrope is really good because it's peer-reviewed, and Duotrope is what I used to use back when I first started sending work out. It's a great database. However, there is a monthly subscription fee, and I know for a lot of writers that's not realistic for you to have an extra expense for something that may still be somewhat of a hobby to you. So Poets and Writers is another great resource. pw.org is the website, and they have a huge database of literary magazines that are looking for work. Okay, so one of the first things that I do is I scroll through the database and open maybe 50 different tabs. I open everything that sounds like I might be a good fit for. Once all the tabs are open, the first thing you want to do is to go to the About section. Sometimes it's the masthead. There isn't sort of a standard, apparently, for what the About section and the masthead are. Half the time the masthead is the list of who's running the magazine. Half the time the About section is the list who's running the magazine. It's important information to know, but what you're really looking for is what they feel their company is about, their mission statement. So read both their masthead and their About section if they're separate. Sometimes it is the same. It's very important to get a good idea of who is running the magazine, what their magazine is publishing, what they feel that they are about. So I read all of those for every single one, and anything that sounds like it's still a good fit for me, I then click on the submission guidelines. You must read the submission guidelines when you're submitting work. Read them top to bottom. If it's super long and that's intimidating, don't send work to that place. You need to make sure that you fully understand what they want, what formatting they want, what rights they want, which is super, super important. You need to find out what rights to your work you're giving away. Most magazines are going to ask for some version of first rights, which means they want to be the first place that your work appears in print. Often that includes any online source. They don't want it to have been published on your journal beforehand. They want to have exclusive first rights. That's okay. Anything perpetual, you don't want. Anything that doesn't mention which rights you're giving away is a red flag. You want to make sure that as soon as the work is published, and sometimes maybe they want to have it exclusive to them for a year. More than a year is a little bit strange for a literary journal, but you want the rights to revert back to you, and this is extremely important. You need to maintain full rights to your work after it has been published by them. This is for a lot of reasons. This is if you want to republish the work later with somebody else. It's acceptable for the first place you publish to ask to be credited as the first publisher. It's not acceptable for them to not allow you to publish again in the future, is basically what I'm saying. If you wanted to even just put it up on your blog, you want to make sure that those rights remain with you. You also, just on a respectful level and on a trying to get your work published level, want to make sure that the formatting is exactly what they say. If they want 12's New Roman and they want double-spaced, you do that. If they're saying that you can submit up to 5 poems but no less than 3, you want to make sure that you have 3 to 5 poems. If they're asking that your name appear on every page of the manuscript, you better put it on every page. If they ask that your name never appear, you better make sure it doesn't appear. Adhere to their guidelines completely. This is going to give your work the best chance. Now, per the guidelines, you're going to get a file together. If you're submitting a short story, this is going to mean possibly taking your entire story and copying and pasting to a new file and putting together the formatting that they want. If this is for poetry, I like to open a bunch of poems up, the files for them, that I feel would be a pretty good fit or that I feel are completely ready to be sent out, and then pick and choose however many. If they wanted 5 poems, I choose 5 poems. and put them together. You need to kind of think about the order. The first poem that you send in this file is going to be the first one that they read. It's going to be representative of the rest of them to whoever's reading them. You can't avoid that. So make sure that you start strong. Start with the poem that you feel the best fits with their journal and go from there. Occasionally, journals are going to ask that you copy and paste your poem into the body of an email. This isn't that common anymore. Most literary journals have moved to using Submittable. And for Submittable, typically they're going to want everything in one file. Have that in mind. You're probably going to be doing that, putting 5 poems or 1 short story or maybe multiple short stories together into a single file to send to them. When you go to label it accurately spelled with the name of the publication and submission. This is a really good way to keep track of what you have. And if they know for sure that you've sent it to the right place and that you spelled their name correctly, they're going to look at it a little bit happier than if you misspell it or you have a different name on it. You don't want to have any kind of confusion because they can see your file name. If you are sending it through an email, make sure that you double check that you're sending it to the correct email and make sure that you keep a record of which emails you've sent and to where. I like to break up my files in email, and I do this with Submittable submissions as well because they send you an email to say that your submission has been accepted. Basically, I keep a submissions, rejections, and exceptions tab in the side of my email, and everything gets filtered into there accordingly. If something's been rejected, it gets taken out of the submissions. If something gets accepted, it still gets taken out of the submissions and it gets moved into the appropriate file. So I can always see where I've submitted, what's still pending, and all of that. Also, when it comes to Submittable, this is going back to when you're first looking at which places are appropriate for sending your work. Because many places use Submittable, they ask for a reading fee. A reading fee for Submittable is typically $3. A lot of literary journals are moving towards that to help support their cost. This may be slightly controversial, and I've talked about it before. In my personal opinion, if a literary magazine is asking for a reading fee, the only reason to pay a reading fee to have your work read is, one, if that magazine is extremely prominent in the community that you want to be a part of. If you have seen other people talking about them quite a bit, you know that they have a lot of pull in the community that you want to be a part of. Let's say if it's the science fiction community and you wrote a sci-fi story, if it's the poetry community and every poet you love on Twitter is talking about it, then that's worthwhile to send in a submission fee. However, anything more than $5 is ridiculous, and you do need to steer clear of that. The other reason that a small submission fee, and in this case, $3 or less, it would be acceptable is if they're offering to pay upon publication. Any literary journal that is not offering to pay you upon publication or isn't benefiting you is not worth paying money towards. And the reason for this that I feel very strongly about is that if a literary journal is relying entirely on its contributors to stay afloat with submission fees, they're probably not doing well enough to be worth sending your work to. Once you have put together your file and have submitted it through Submittable or sometimes through email, make sure that you have completely submitted it, it has sent, you're finished, and you get a return email saying that it has been sent. If you're sending just through email, keep all of the sents in your submissions file. If you're sending through Submittable and it worked, every time they will send you an email saying that your submission has gone through. Be absolutely sure that you keep track of these. This is going to help out a lot later when you want to submit again to make sure you're not sending a whole bunch of multiples to the same place, because they're going to catch on to that and they're probably not going to look so favorably upon somebody who's been sending a whole bunch of work without waiting for a reply. You want to wait for a reply, or sometimes they'll say wait 6 months and then you can query us. Poetry is sort of treated as bottom of the barrel in literary journals, unfortunately. They typically aren't going to offer to pay, which is why you want to avoid submission fees as much as possible. Typically, they're going to ask for only up to 5 poems, and typically they'll only take maybe 1 or 2. This is not going to be the case. If you're submitting short stories, 9 times out of 10, they pay for your work. 9 times out of 10, there aren't submission fees. 9 times out of 10, they're going to be back to you within 3 months. It's just the way that it's been set up. You can expect that of the nonfiction and fiction community. In poetry, you're going to be waiting 6 months, sometimes a year. If it's been a year, you can query, but sometimes giving up on it is better and moving on to literary journals that are going to get back to you in a more reasonable time because they probably have not gone under, which is often the case when you don't hear back from literary journals. There is kind of a saying, I guess, especially among poets, that you need to send out 100 submissions and receive 100 rejections before you get anything published. You may be really lucky and have done really good research and sent the perfect piece of work to the perfect place and they choose you right away. And that is fantastic. Good for you. Oftentimes, even if you read through everything that they had, even if you read through the whole website, you subscribed to the journal, everything, and you felt like the poem you had was the perfect pick for them, it was exactly what they wanted, oftentimes they're going to send you back an automated response that says your work isn't for them. You need to not be discouraged by that. It's nothing against you. They didn't feel that the work was as perfect as you did. Just keep submitting. Mentioning subscriptions as well. A lot of literary journals are going to ask that you subscribe to their literary journal. Obviously, they want to get more business. They want you to know kind of what they're about before you jump into it. That is great. However, as someone submitting, it isn't realistic for you to be subscribed to 60 plus literary journals. If you have the money, do it. That is fantastic. A lot of us don't have the kind of money to subscribe to that many. I would choose a few that are your absolute favorites, that you love everything they do, and do subscribe. If they have a newsletter and you're submitting to them, absolutely subscribe to that because those are great. They let you know when they're asking for submissions. They let you know who else is being published so you can kind of keep up to date in the poetry community. If they're asking that you subscribe to them in order to send in your work, that isn't ridiculous. Just don't feel bad if you can't do that for every single journal, or if you can't even do that for the 60 that you're sending out for. If that's not realistic for you, that's fine. And that's especially for poetry because the literary magazines don't tend to pay their poets. You don't have to feel so bad if you also can't pay to subscribe to something that you haven't even been published in yet. If you do get published, it is really great to help support other poets who've been published by the same literary journal and subscribe to them. But at the same time, we all know that you're going to be another avenue for advertising as well, because you're going to tell all your friends and family that you got published by this literary journal and hope that they will read you. So yeah, that's a basic breakdown of how you submit to literary journals. I hope that was helpful. If you have any further questions, leave a comment down below. If you're interested in kind of further discussion of the poetry publishing scene especially, I have a few other videos I've made in the past about some of the controversy regarding that, and that's all going to be in the description below. And good luck to everyone who's sending out their work into the world. I hope you get published, and if you don't get discouraged because it is going to happen. You are going to find a place where your work is the right fit for them, they're the right fit for you, and everything is going to work out. So stay positive. All right, I'll see you again soon. Bye.
Hey Mulan. Hey.